Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to the first of my 1 year anniversary for my YouTube channel, at least, videos. I'm doing 3 of these over the next week, roughly. The one I'm doing today is the last year for me, so Hearthstone, non-Hearthstone, anything related to where I got today. It's going to be one of those videos where it's basically just a vlog. It's the closest thing I've ever done to one, at least. And there's not really much to see, so it's one of those videos you probably would be better off just watching in the background while doing something else, just a warning. The other 2 videos are going to be one which was actually requested by someone who put a comment on one of my videos, which is all the decks I've actually used competitively over the past year, which is going to be quite a funny endeavor for me because some of these decks are atrocious at the moment. But at the time they were good. And the other one I'm doing is next week, the top 10 changes that have been done to Hearthstone. So things like completely absurd balance changes, anything to do with the game itself, infrastructure wise, like the turn timer, things like that. Just anything whatsoever. I'm going to do a top 10 on that, I'm going to do this video, and then I'm also going to do the decks I played competitively. And I'm probably going to end up doing this at the end of every year, and just go year by year as far as this is concerned. But everything returns back to normal once I've finished this. So the weekly after the one this week will be Naxxramas spoilers, and I'll do some other topic and just go back to normal. But anyway, as for this video, I'm just going to really start from the beginning as far as about a year ago goes, which was basically before I was even involved in Hearthstone, actually. Now, this is a bit of a weird cycle that goes with me, because a lot of people tend to focus on one game. There's people who tend to focus on one game at a time, and then there's people who tend to focus on multiple games at a time and just play casually. I'm kind of in the middle. I focus on one game, and then I dabble around a lot, and then I focus on another game again. I don't have sort of a uniform thing. So what happened with me was I was playing StarCraft competitively, then I stopped, and I played a bunch of other games just randomly. I played Dota, League, at the same time. Yes, I know, some people are going to hate me for that. But yeah, I played Dota, League, I played some Magicka, and got involved in Magic again, things like that. I just played a lot of games at the same time. And then, about a year ago, I came across Noxious's channel, Noxious Hearthstone. And he went over all the cards which were spoiled, effectively, at that time. They were all the cards that were spoiled from Hearthstone. And Hearthstone was a game I was keeping my eye on from BlizzCon, and I thought it's an interesting concept, but it looks like it has a couple of pitfalls in it, which it still does, but it's still a good game. And then, about a month later, after that, the entire card pool for Hearthstone was data mined by Hearthstone. And one guy actually made a simulator port for it on Cockatrice, which is actually a online free variation for like Magic the Gathering. People use it to play Magic the Gathering. He made a Hearthstone port for it and said, well, does anyone want the file? You can play games, you can play whenever you like, people who spectate. Yeah, so a lot of people jumped on, and I was one of them. I got on it pretty quickly. Nox was where I found out about it from, and I jumped on straight away and started building around various decks. I tried some of the crazy secret mages, and I tried some crazy druid and shaman decks and things like that, and it was good fun. And then suddenly on one day, there's one night which was very confusing, because everyone on the server, there's normally about, at the time, about 20 people at a time playing, so you could always find someone to play or watch, or at least spectate, and everyone on the entire server playing Hearthstone disappeared. So I had to go looking for these people, and I find them all in the same room. So I joined the room, and I get kicked instantly because I joined as an actual player. So then I joined as a spectator and discovered it was a King of the Hill. Now, the King of the Hill, I discovered, was actually just a place to do things while they were waiting to start the first Hearthstone tournament. And so I jump on the TS I'm given, which at the time was HearthstonePlayers.com, which was a TS I discovered was being lended out by a guy called XDiga, who was working at HearthstonePlayers.com, to a new community that had just started called Bubble Hearth. Now, Bubble Hearth would eventually become what we know today as managrind. But at the time, it was just Bubble Hearth, and it was basically just a two-man team, which was Noxious and Easy Mod. It was just really easy. Noxious was more of an honorary member who just got in because he was popular and he didn't really do much, and it was always one of those funny in-jokes where he didn't quite know what he was doing there, and he was just kind of there as a content producer. Eventually, he would get his own role and things, but at the first, it was really, really funny. But so the first Hearthstone tournament took part, and I brought in a completely crazy deck, which I'll go more in depth with on the weekly. But it was just some crazy shaman aggro deck that should not have worked, but it did, because no one knew what they were doing. You got to keep in mind that we'd only had access to the cards for about a week and a half, so no one knew what they were doing. So I just ran into a couple random Murloc decks and things like that, and I actually get top 4 with that. And the final was double Druid, which was not a surprise in hindsight, considering how overpowered Druids were back then. But the final was double Druid, and I was playing some random Shaman aggro deck. And the funniest thing was, about a year ago, I was incredibly talkative, like all the time. So I actually was taken aside by Easy at one point and basically told to, for lack of a better word, shut up, because I was talking a lot. Now, over the past year, I've got a lot easier to hang around, but at the time, I will admit, I was really annoying. I was really, really annoying, and it's actually the reason I started making YouTube videos, is because I like to talk a lot at the time. So that ends up happening, and in the past, I've tried making YouTube videos with Dota and things like that, so I thought, well, why don't we just get the vague deck lists together from the people in the top 4 and make a video about it. So I made a what was originally the first Hearthstone Weekly, which were now the tournament recaps, and I made the first one ever. And at this particular point, I just made the video, and I showed it to Easy, and he gave it bluntly, which was terrible, and it was. Now, to give you an idea, the first weekly on this channel is horrible, and that was the better version. The original one was so bad that I actually removed it. It was that bad. Even when I started making videos, I thought it was terrible. Now that's a new level of bad as far as video making goes. You can actually see the updated version, although I would recommend taking it with a pinch of salt, because that video is pretty bad, and it really does show how far things have come. But that video is pretty bad, but it's pretty hilarious to go watch actually in hindsight. Now, about this time, I also ended up meeting Noxious about a week after the tournament, who was just randomly hanging around on TeamSpeak, and he helped me a lot with starting videos, and I actually got to know him quite well over time, and we're fairly decent friends now. But yeah, I got to meet Noxious, which was really cool, considering he was the closest thing to a Hearthstone celebrity at the time. And he really got me into it at first, so it was nice to sort of meet the person who got me into Hearthstone in the first place. Now, from this particular part, I decided, well, I made top 4 in the first one, and I also made top 8 in the second one, so why don't I just start going into it more competitively? I mean, I've been looking for a game I can get more competitive in. So at this point, I meet 2 different players, which ended up becoming my first testing group, which was Moon, who's been on several of my videos, and currently he does play Hearthstone, but not at a hyper-competitive level. And he would later play a big part in this actual story. And the other guy was Vojan, who unfortunately disappeared about a month afterwards. He stopped playing Hearthstone, but he was a really, really fun guy to play around. He actually taught me a lot about the game originally, because he was one of those guys who plays the really, really underplayed classes and just sometimes wins because no one knows how to play against them. He was playing Warrior at the time, which was a terrible class, and he also played a couple of other classes which just weren't that good. So he taught me a lot about sort of expecting the unexpected as far as Hearthstone goes. About this time as well, I met 3 players that were very important, which was Dorox, Spaj, and Forsen. Now, Forsen, most of you probably know. He's a very, very popular streamer at the moment, and it does confuse people a lot, because I have mod on his channel, even though people never saw me before. And whenever I put something in the channel, it's like, oh, hi, Jotto, because we actually have known each other for about a year now. It's been about 11 months, actually. And originally, the 4 of us, which was me, Dorox, Spaj, and Forsen, were essentially rivals. At the beginning, Dorox was a priest player. He was the only priest player, besides Easy and Noxious, actually, and he basically taught them both how to play priest. Spaj was a serious shaman player, and he was, up until about a couple months ago, a pro player on the managrind team. And Forsen eventually randomly disappeared and then came back and then got into Hearthstone pretty competitively. And at the time, he was a hunter player. He used to play a lot of control hunter, a little bit of the unleash combo, months ahead of time, keep in mind, and just a lot of interesting decks. He was the kind of person who always disabled spectating because he didn't want his decks leaking out, which of course led to everyone finding out his decks, because he played against one guy and then that person would immediately come on TeamSpeak and tell everyone the cards they saw. It was really funny. So ironically, most people knew Forsen's decks better than anyone else. As for me at the time, I was dabbling around a bit. I played some Shaman, some Paladin, played a bit of Rogue here and there. Druid ended up getting banned, actually. It was that powerful. Something else I'm going to have to go over in a week from now when I go over all the Hearthstone changes that made a big impact. Druid was actually banned. So I was a much more of a player that dabbled around, whereas the rest of them were quite specialized. But it was very, very interesting because it got me really into playing the game competitively because I had people that I wanted to beat. Now, from here, I ended up being drafted in to actually commentate tournaments. Now, I was commentating with someone who had a big impact on the Hearthstone forums and is currently an MVP on the Hearthstone forums, Sar. Now, for lack of a better phrase, Sar was a co-commentator of mine simply because he talks, he never stops. That guy, if the reason he's good at posting things on forums and long posts that are actually quite good to read, and he even made articles and things like that, is because he never stops talking. We actually had an in-joke about this. He just never stops talking, and if you get him on an article, you can actually read his stuff. He makes almost essays on the articles, and they're actually worth reading. He's a very, very good article writer. And it's kind of funny that comes out of him just not being able to stop talking. Once you get him going, he doesn't stop. So he was actually the main commentator, and I was more to support because I was also judging the tournaments at the time. We didn't have Hearthstone to do the rules for us, so I had to judge them. Now, I also started running tournaments around this point after commentating died down a little bit. Those videos are still up, by the way, on the managrind channel. You can go look for those. But I actually stopped commentating tournaments, getting back into the game more competitively. Because the managrind team was starting to become, for the pro team, was starting to become more of something on the horizon that Easy wanted a couple of us to actually be involved in. So I started playing in the tournaments while running them, which is actually quite difficult. And I became part of the managrind core team officially. I'd actually been unofficially part of it for a long time, and it was just a formality. But I ended up becoming the fourth member of the managrind team, along with Audit, Noxious, and Easy. Most people didn't know about Audit. He was the background guy. He actually did a lot for the community, but he was a lot of the background guy. And also Xdiga, who was supplying the TeamSpeak server, obviously. Now, around this part, after I joined the managrind core team, we started with the Manacasts. Now, the Manacasts was the managrind podcast, and we did, I think, upwards of 20 episodes. Eventually we stopped, but we did a lot of episodes, and they were actually quite popular. I really enjoyed my time on the Manacasts. We used to have me, Noxious, and Easy, and then also a guest every week, and it was a lot of fun. We talked about a lot of different things, and I really, really enjoyed being on a podcast, and I hope it's something I can get involved in the future as well. It was a lot of fun. Of course, I ended up being sort of the guy everyone loves to disagree with a lot of the time because I'm very opinionated when it comes to this stuff. But it was a lot of fun, and it's something I do hope I can do in the future. And a lot of the Manacasts were actually really, really good episodes. So if anything, I mean, out of everything that I mentioned video-wise in this particular video, I think the Manacasts are the ones that are the best to go watch. The Manacasts were actually really, really fun, and I would highly recommend looking those up and watching a couple. Now, from here, I ended up getting involved with Moon in a team. We started a team called IBM, which was a pun on words in multiple ways. It was one IBM, which is IBM Manor, but it was also Ironbeak Missiles. It was a troll team. We basically made a team with a lot of different people on it. It was Chromatic, Nick Demon, who I ended up actually teaching how to run tournaments, and also me and Moon originally, and just a bunch of random people. And we were just having fun with it. Now, the name actually came from the mascot card for me and Moon. who were like co-managing it, you could say, which was mine was the R&B Cal, as you can look at my channel avatar, and random side tangent by the way, the R&B Cal thing, it actually comes from a forum post I made, which was back when Nat Pagal was a 0-5 and drew at the end of your turn, and Shieldbearer had like Enrage 1, so R&B Cal was like mandatory in all of my decks, and actually did really, really well, because you just silence their Nat Pagal, and sure. So I actually made a forum post about it, and it went to like front page. It was the most popular post for like a week. So someone brought up Jotto Cal, and it kind of stuck. So that's where that came from. And Moon, he ended up getting the arcane missiles because every single time he played an arcane missiles in a tournament, they never missed. So people started coining that term, and so when we made a team together, we ended up just naming after both cards. Now, after this happened, I ended up getting drafted into the managrind EU team. There was a managrind NA team as well, which was captained by Spo originally, and I think it still is. It was captained by Spo, who was someone who sort of came up out of nowhere and was a very, very good player, and Spaj was also on that team. Forsen and Dorox disappeared by this point. Dorox came back later briefly and then left again, which was kind of disappointing because I think he was hands down the best player in the community at the time, and he could have become an absolute titan in the current Hearthstone if he had stuck around. As for me and Moon, Moon ended up captaining the EU team, and I ended up also going on there with Wushsame and... Yeah, it was Wushsame, and then when I eventually left, Timbolt replaced me. But anyway, moving on. So while this was going on, I was also training Chromatic and Nick Demon to run tournaments because I was moving on to the pro teams and onto more video production. So I had to sort of pass on my tournament managing to someone else, so I moved it on to Chromatic and Nick Demon. Now, after this, I met Flux Flashor, who is the manager of Hearthstone, and he had a bit of a problem on Reddit, but he's back to managing Hearthstone, which it's good because he's very, very good at what he does, and I'm glad he's back. So I met Flux at around this point, and I got partnered with Curse on YouTube, started getting my stuff featured on Hearthstone, started writing articles for managrind, things like that. All the crazy stuff on Hearthstone you saw with me started there. Was when I met actually Flux, and it was a big deal for me. It was a big deal. It meant I could transition my channel from something that was gaining. I think I'd got up to about 500 in 8 months, and then it just accelerated from there once I started doing things with Flux and Hearthstone, and it was a big step for me. Now, around this time, I met the Shiv, who I'm still in contact with. I still talk to. He's a very, very good guy. And he ended up just becoming a member of the community. Now, he moved up in the community extremely fast. Extremely fast. He ended up moving into tournament management, and then he ended up becoming part of the managrind sort of top team, and he managed the entire tournament section of managrind for a long time. And he was an amazing, very no-nonsense type of guy. He's one of the guys who... He always looks at things logically and does things sort of... He knows that it's difficult, and he did a lot of things on his own, and it was absolutely perfect for tournament managing. He did a really, really good job when he was there, and managrind tournaments started big once it happened. We moved back to Swiss along with the MLG stuff. We got limited tournaments started, shifted a lot for managrind, and it was really, really sad to see him go eventually. But yeah, he did a lot for managrind, and it was kind of important that he ended up showing up when he did. Now, after that happened, the ladder system came out, the current ladder, and they decided to nerf all the buff decks, which meant that Mage destroyed the metagame, completely destroyed it. It was the only viable deck for like 2 weeks. But when I say only viable, I mean it was Mage and healing decks, and that was it. That was literally it. That was the entire metagame, and it was really miserable. So the ladder system came out, and that was going on, and that's actually when I stopped playing Hearthstone because I didn't have the cards to build the Mage deck, and it was just hopeless. And I wanted to take a couple weeks break from Hearthstone just to see where they were going to go, and just stop rage quitting essentially from it, because I was getting really, really close to rage quitting. And I wanted to take a break for a bit, and then Easy, who was managing the teams, wanted to set up this entire thing with mass streaming, with MLG, and things like that, which ended up did happening for the managrind teams eventually, but it was supposed to be a big thing at the time. So I just could. I wanted time to see what was going on, and he didn't particularly like that, so I just decided to leave the team, which was much to the dismay of Moon and Wushime, and Timbal ended up coming to replace me, and I made sure that went smoothly. But Wushime and Moon really didn't like the fact that I left the team, and eventually Moon ended up leaving the team as well. So it was a big transition for me, but I just didn't want to be pressured into making a decision that was really hasty, so I just decided to leave the team in general. And I took a big break from Hearthstone. This actually put me off the game a lot. Of course, I still did content, but you don't need to play the game to do content. If you keep up with the game adequately, and you watch a lot of Hearthstone and things like that, then it's fine. I just couldn't stand playing it. That was the main problem. Now, around this time, I started playing games like SoulForge and Dota again. Dota is a game I've played for years and years and years over time. And I went back to Dota. I took a long break from it. When I played Hearthstone, went back to it, started playing SoulForge competitively, started streaming SoulForge. Actually got fairly decent at the game. Started playing in some of their qualifier tournaments. It was a very interesting time of my absence of Hearthstone career, you could say. So I was doing a lot with the SoulForge stuff, and I ended up stopping SoulForge, not because of the game itself. I mean, Rise of the Forgeborn came out, which was set 2 for SoulForge, and it was a big deal, and I really wanted to play, and played a bunch. And the main reason I stopped playing SoulForge is actually nothing to do with the game. The main reason I stopped playing SoulForge was because of the stuff that happened afterwards, which we'll get to now. Now, just before I go on to sort of the return to Hearthstone and such, the mana costs ended up actually stopping. Now, the premise of the mana cost stopping were kind of sketchy, to be honest. There was a lot of random stuff. There was a couple weeks break, and then we decided to make one without asking, quote unquote. Noxious was supposed to be managing the mana costs, and later on he would be given the entire rights to doing them in the first place, so it was very confusing. But Noxious was given the rights to sort of do the mana cost and such, but then one week there was some big news. There was like a patch and things. We wanted to do a mana cost, but Easy was out of town for like a week, so we just decided to do one. And a lot of people were watching. Actually, we got a guest on. A lot of people were watching, and then when Easy came back, he wasn't particularly happy that we didn't ask him. So the mana costs were stopped. They were cut entirely. So it was a little weird, but the mana costs were entirely stopped, and that was not the best of times for me, because I actually really enjoyed those things. Now, after the mana cost was stopped, I ended up coming back to Hearthstone. This happened a couple months ago. Came back to Hearthstone after like a 4-month break, and I decided to play in the limited tournament that was coming up, and I did fairly well. I narrowly missed top 8. I was taking part in some limited tournaments, and I didn't want anything to do with tournament management again, but I did play in some limited tournaments, and then a week after that I met Grandpa Porky and Fire, 2 British Hearthstone players. So I ended up saying, well, why not? I'll just join your team, because it was called Unleash the Brits at the time, and I'm British. I'm an expatriate. I live in Cyprus, but I'm British, so I might as well take part. So I joined, and that got me really motivated to actually do things. And I never got Legend in the past. I never did, because I rage quit basically once I was in the first ladder season. I just didn't play long enough to even get to Legend in the first place. So I thought, well, okay, I'll just get Legend. I should be able to. I know I can. And I got into Legend, effectively. I got into Legend, and at that point I sort of hit... in that sort of set, I actually got back to my peak at Hearthstone. Once I got into Legend, I felt like I was back at peak. Sort of peak condition as far as my Hearthstone skills go. Now, over time, I've actually gone up past that, so I feel like at the moment, I feel like I'm at the best I've ever been. But after I ended up getting Legend, the Acebreakers team was formed. Now, the Acebreakers was basically what happens when you combine Unleash the Brits with 2 Swedish players, a German and another British guy. And we thought the Unleash the Brits name was stupid, so we just changed it, and we got a logo, which Birdie ended up creating, one of the Swedish players. and yeah, it went pretty well. So we got the entire team started, and Porky ended up putting me into the captain slot, simply because of my experience in professional play in the past and my experience with deck creation and things like that. So he ended up putting me in the slot of captain, and things went quite well for a couple of weeks. We were doing really, really well in tournaments. We got a couple people to top 8s, things like that. And then the managrind tournaments were cancelled. Now, a lot of people were asking about this. The managrind tournaments were cancelled, and at the time, I wasn't gonna say anything about it because, well, I was in managrind, and confidential information is confidential. But eventually, the last tournament that was ever going to be played for EU was the final Friday Night Swiss for EU, and the reason why we were stopping the tournaments kind of came up and was unavoidable. On Twitter, it was something to do with reorganizing resources or something like that. I didn't read it really. It was something to do with reorganizing resources away, and it was done with a heavy heart. But then on the final EU tournament, I was put in a very weird position where I was waiting for the tournament manager, who was actually the team manager of Acebreakers now, Grandpa Porky, to come home and actually do the tournament management. But he was stuck away from home. I don't know why. It may have been some accident or just something unplanned. It's irrelevant really, but we ended up with no tournament manager. And when I asked around, there weren't any, as in absolutely none, because the entire tournament team had left. So there was no one to actually run the tournament, so I had to cancel it. And I wasn't even on the tournament team. People knew about this. I wasn't on the tournament team, so I had to cancel the final EU tournament. And that was something which, it was information that wasn't really supposed to come forward, but it ended up coming forward in front of about 120 people, because it was pretty obvious at that point that if no one can run a tournament on a Friday when pretty much everyone is home anyway to run it, then there's obviously a hole in tournament management. And people have also been noticing that Chromatic stopped running them at some point, Shiv stopped running them at some point, and he ended up disappearing from the TeamSpeak, things like that, and just the entire tournament team left. So the tournaments ended up being stopped, and it was really, really irritating for me that I had to cancel it, because the tournaments were something which at first I was the first person in managrind to suggest things like the Swiss tournament all the way back last year, from double elimination to Swiss, and I was pushing all the things forward with the tournaments all the time. And then eventually the final cancellation had to come down to me, so it was a bit of a full loop type of thing if you think about it. Now after that happened, I ended up actually leaving managrind. That's why the intro disappeared off my videos and the logo. I ended up leaving managrind, and that's also why articles stopped on the tournament recaps on Hearthstone. I just left managrind. I couldn't handle the way the management was done and the whole thing with the tournaments and things like that. I just didn't want to be involved with it, so I left managrind, which was something which I did with a rather heavy heart actually, because I didn't really want to leave managrind. It was something I invested a lot of time in, and eventually I had to, because it was all going down the drain and I didn't want to be attached onto a sinking ship, so to say, as far as the tournaments go and everything I was actually involved in. So yeah, I ended up leaving managrind, and currently I'm in a weird purgatory period where I'm sort of looking for a new project to jump on, and eventually when one pops up, I will. I'll jump on a new project, get involved with it. It's how I work. I've jumped on plenty of other projects in the past, and I'll do it because I want to be involved in the Hearthstone community, right? I'm currently being part of a team, playing tournaments continuously, talking to people, and just making videos. Like, this is something I really want to do, is get involved with the Hearthstone community. And so when a new project turns up, then I'll definitely be happy to join and help, because I can. I want to be involved in this kind of stuff. And sort of leaving managrind has left a bit of a hole in my Hearthstone, sort of in my Hearthstone life, so to say. I really want to be involved in something like this, and it was kind of irritating to see the whole cycle go through in a 1-year cycle, weirdly enough. It ended up taking roughly a year. It was roughly a year from when I joined managrind to when I left managrind, so that's kind of hilarious actually. So it goes in 1-year cycles. But anyway, currently I did the whole thing with Legend, put out the Hunter deck tech, started playing in tournaments, getting top 4s, top 8s, and back to above where I was before as a Hearthstone player. I'm much, much better than I ever was. and I feel like I'm I'm in a position where all I can go from here is up. Like I'm really focused on Hearthstone now. I don't have any exams anymore. I've got my last one on Monday, and I can get really focused on this stuff. And I'm really happy it's now summer because I can focus fully on Hearthstone. It's something I really want to do, and it's definitely a good time of year for me. It's definitely a good time of year for me, and it's definitely something that I'm gonna keep going. And Naxxramas is gonna come out. I'll keep doing the Naxxramas spoiler reviews, try and get any more of my teammates on, or just anyone who really wants to be on them. I'll see if I can get hold of some other sort of Hearthstone community members at some point, since I do have contact information for a couple well-known names, but getting them on is a different story. So anyway, as for now, if you have any questions to do with any of this stuff or any of the other 2 videos that are going to be happening this week, please put them in the comment section. I'll be glad to answer pretty much any question I can. And if you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. As for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.